We're almost there. I can feel it. Last month we had the Accredited Investor Definition Review Act that passed overwhelmingly in the House out of committee. And interestingly, at the same time, we had this new thing, the Equal Opportunity for All Investors Act, which actually came out of committee at the same time as the Accredited Investor Act, which if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it below. But the things are moving quickly. And the Equal Opportunity Act actually passed the House of Representatives just last week. And when I say passed, like overwhelmingly passed, and I'll talk about that in a second. So I've actually got the bill itself. So I wanted to go through the bill. It's not super long, and it's, again, hard to find. So I'm gonna go through the bill, and then I'm gonna give you my 5 observations about this particular bill, what my thoughts in general are, and then obviously we'll open it up to questions. So bill is called the Equal Opportunity for All Investors Act, and it basically updates the accredited investor definition, kind of like the other the other bills we've been talking about. But essentially, it says, and I'm going to paraphrase here a little bit, but it revises the definition to include any person who is certified through an examination required on Section B no later than 1 year. So only 12 months from the time this bill becomes law. Within 1 year, the SEC must establish this examination, and this examination is going to certify that an individual is an accredited investor. And this examination, I'm just going to read it to you, is designed with an appropriate level of difficulty such that an individual financial sophistication would be unlikely to fail. Includes methods to determine whether an individual seeking to be certified as an accredited investor demonstrate competency in respect to, among other things, the different types of securities, the disclosure requirements under the Securities Act, which the issuers, syndicators must abide by, financial statements and how those actually work. So you're going to have a little bit of a background on how to read a balance sheet and a cash flow statement, which is kind of cool. And also some potential conflicts of interest. And there's a couple more in there, corporate governance and, other kind of stuff. But it's the clearest, as far as I've seen, it's the clearest delineation of what that examination would actually entail. And this examination would be free of charge, which is interesting. And it will be effectuated or given by FINRA, which is I think most of you guys know what FINRA, it's a self-regulatory organization. But unlike the SEC rule, which I'll talk about in a second, the SEC was going to actually outsource that to other companies that were going to certify other companies to do this examination. This was actually going to be directly from FINRA. So why is this important? It's slightly different than, we've got the Accredited Investor Definition Review Act. I think this is ahead of it now. And honestly, they're very, very similar with the Accredited Investor Definition Act. In fact, this one's a lot more detailed. And now that this one's ahead of the curve, I don't see why you would need all of these different acts. So I'm assuming this one's ahead of the game and this one's going to pass first. And I do think it's going to pass, and I'll tell you why in a second. And it's slightly different than the SEC. So it's always interesting to me because remember, the SEC, when was this? December of 2020, kind of already went down this road. They actually approved a final rule, not even a proposal. So this was a final rule that they came out with, just over 2.5 years ago. And they were going to do their own sort of certification program, but they haven't had a deadline of that, right? So remember, they updated the accredited investor definition. They said that, hey, if if you have a Series 7, a Series 65, Series 82, you're going to be accredited. They updated the Accredited Definition Act a little bit, but then they said, look, we're going to actually do these certification programs, but they didn't give themselves a deadline, number one, which I thought was interesting. And now it's been over 2 years. And I think the reason for that, obviously, is because that rule passed under the prior administration, under Commissioner Clayton. And since the new commissioners come in, Geisler, they haven't wanted to touch this. So I think the reason why all of these bills are being introduced into Congress is in order to basically light a fire under the SEC, because otherwise the SEC is just going to sit on this thing for who knows how many more years. And now that this is actually a congressional mandate, so to speak, I think that's going to either get one of these things passed, or maybe the SEC is going to actually go ahead and pass its own version of it sooner rather than later. But I think, it's an interesting thing. I got basically 5 observations about this new rule. So number one, and I think this is really important, it passed, this one and the the updated accredited investor rule passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. I mean, the one that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that came out of committee with a 41-2 margin. mean, not even close, 41-2. And this one passed the House 383-18. I mean, it's not even close. And so I can't imagine there's a world where this doesn't go. It obviously goes to the Senate now, that the Senate doesn't pass it. And it's got so much bipartisan support on it. But look, by no means am I a congressional expert in how all this political stuff works, but I just don't even see how this gets even vetoed. So they've got enough votes to actually override these vetoes. So to me, this is almost like a foregone conclusion that either this law is going to make it to the books and we're going to have an official clock ticking, or the SEC is going to finally get around to implementing the rules that's already passed. I mean, it's already passed the rules, they're just sitting on it. And you guys know my thoughts on why they're sitting on it. It's because they're planning, in my opinion, you guys have heard me say this before, they're planning on updating the dollar amount for an accredited investor from a pure net worth standard, right? So there's going to be sort of, in my opinion, this is just I don't have any fancy connections with the SEC or anything, but my belief is you're going to have a dual track now. You're going to have a dual track of how you can become an accredited investor. You can either qualify under the financial means test, and that's going to be a higher number. It's not going to be $1 million anymore. It's going to be whatever it's going to be, 2 million, 3 million. Remember those rumors about 10 million. I don't think it's going to be 10 million. I think it's going to be closer to 3 million. And I've talked about that in previous videos. So you're either going to qualify automatically under the financial test, or if you don't qualify that way, you have this other option of getting certified through this FINRA test that's going to get laid out here, within the next 12 months. I mean, again, I don't know how the process works exactly with the Senate, but this came out of committees 5 weeks ago. It's already been passed by the House. I'm assuming it's going to get passed by the Senate here within the next 30 to 60 days. Then it goes back and forth. But once that bill becomes law, within a year, within 12 months of that date, you're going to have these rules implemented, and your investors are going to have an option to go get accredited if they don't qualify under the financial means, which, by the way, as you guys know, they can already do via taking a Series 65 exam, but that's a little bit more complicated than this, because this would just be a free exam that's given by FINRA. You just need to pass the exam and you're going to be qualified. So I thought that was really interesting about how overwhelmingly bipartisan all of these bills have been. So there's clearly a movement from Congress wanting to get this thing moving. The other observation was simply that it contains a little bit more detail in terms of what that certification is going to look like. If you've heard my videos from the last couple of years about the SEC rule, it was very vague. They just said, hey, we're going to outsource this to another company. We're going to license another institution to give this exam, but we didn't know what the exam was going to look like, how long it was going to take. Was it a course you had to take? And same thing with the Accredited Investor Definition Review Act. Not really detailed. If you go back to the video, if you guys were here on the live, what was it, about 4 weeks ago, not much detail. So this is the first time I've actually seen sort of bullet points of what this exam is going to cover, which I thought was interesting. The other cool thing I noticed, again, it was a 1 year. So number 3 observation would be that it was a 1 year turnaround, as opposed to the SEC one, which is indefinite. They're just like going to get to it when they get to it. And then the Accredited Investor Review Act was going to be 18 months. So this is a little bit shorter window, which is exciting. And then the exam is going to be administered. My fourth observation is just to point out that the exam is going to be administered by FINRA. So it's not going to be some random institution that the SEC has to approve, because that's also a bunch of regulation that they'd have to go through. So the fact that they've identified sort of this self-regulatory organization called FINRA, which, they're the ones that give you the Series 65 and all these other series licenses. So FINRA would be administering. And again, I think, this is just my gut. I mean, this came out I saw this two or 3 days ago. My gut tells me that this may just light up a fire with the SEC. The SEC may want to pass its own rules to kind of put their own, have some control over what they're going to be able to do on this thing. So it makes sense to me that the SEC, before this law officially becomes, effective a year from when it passes, I think the SEC is going to have sort of an incentive to actually revisit this, and they're not going to be able to just sit around and wait, until they get kicked out by this administration, and have somebody come in that's actually interested. Because clearly Geisler, the current commissioner, hasn't shown much interest in loosening the rules about accredited investor. All I've heard from the SEC is, how do we make it really more cumbersome, which is the opposite of what Congress wants, the opposite of what everybody else wants. Now, I'd be interested to know in the chat, or if you guys want to chime in too, and I see some questions already popping in, so drop your questions, I'll answer them. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing in general. I mean, I've even on social with some people saying it was a bad idea. I think if you're a syndicator, you're just going to love this, right? I mean, let's be honest. We're not here to to support the regulations or any of that stuff. If you're a syndicator, this is going to help you. This is going to open up the avenue of getting more accredited investors. Going to make it easier for you to do a 506c, for example, because you're going to be able to go out and advertise and do all the nice things about 506c. But then you're going to have a larger pool of investors, because right now that's the biggest limitation, is you're only limited to accredited investors and you've got to verify them. And so there's only a certain amount of accredited investors out there. So opening up that avenue, yes, you're going to lose some people under the financial test. I don't know how many, but you know, if you just got to go take a test, you know, and if you guys have seen my checklist for the Series 65, I call it the easiest route, but it's certainly not easy, right? You got to do an application. You've got all these regulatory compliance. You've got to take the exam, and then you've got to, you know, be in good standing with the state and be under the regulatory authority. Here, you just go take a test and it's free. So anyway, that was kind of my ramble about the thing. The bottom line is, for me, is I am super excited to see not only that this is moving through Congress, but that it's moving pretty darn quick. You know, like I said, it was about 6 weeks ago, I think, that all of these statutes, all of these bills came out of committee, which was, you know, with an overwhelming majority. And now 6 weeks later, it's already passed the House. So I can't imagine it's going to take too much longer for it to pass Senate. And obviously, I'll keep you guys updated when I got more updates. I saw a question here from our good friend Chris Collins. So for today, how long before the test becomes a new way to become accredited? 1 year, or is there a while? Yeah, let's be realistic here. So it's 1 year from the date the bill. I won't even say the bill becomes law, because usually there's even a lag between the law and when it, you know, when the law actually gets officially on the books of the Federal Registrar. So my guess would be that you have this thing passed. Let's just say it gets passed in this next quarter, right? So let's say in the next, just be conservative. Like I would say that by the end of the third, what is it? The end of the second quarter. By the end of the third quarter, I would say, I'm going out on a limb and saying this will actually become law. So now you're looking at a year from there for this to actually kick in. So you're talking about, you know, the fall of 2024 would be my total best guesstimate. It's not like this is just kind of my thoughts there, but I'm guessing it's going to be, you know, third quarter of next year is probably when you'll start seeing that, where somebody would actually, you know, you let's be practical. Somebody calls you up and says, hey, I don't have $1 million, or I don't have $3 million. And you can be like, hey, just go take this exam and you can invest. Will it be an online Doug asked, will it be an online self-take exam? There's no language or any reference to how that's going to be. So we don't know. I'm guessing it would be, but there's nothing in the statute. There's nothing in the comments that I saw. I dug around quite a bit today to try and get all the information related to the bill. Not a ton of information out there, but there's no reference to whether it's going to be an online exam. I guess the only bad, you know, with ChatGPT these days and all that stuff, it's not that hard to so maybe it's not going to be an online exam, or there's going to be some security measures. Do you think that Greg, do you think that the increased restrictions will increase demand for funds for non-accredited? Yeah, it's an interesting question. Do you think there's going to be a demand for funds for non-accredited? So here's something that we have been talking about, is that we just don't know how it's going to work out, because I do believe that on the one hand, the pool of accredited investors is going to shrink, because instead of being $1 million, it's going to be whatever, right? Let's just say it's 3 million. I don't know what the numbers are in terms of how many accredited investors you'd have at 3 million, but it's obviously going to be less than at $1 million, right? But on the other hand, through the second path, you're going to be able to expand. You're going to be literally from people who have no chance to even make less than $1 million today. There was no chance for them to be accredited. There's going to be an avenue for them to become accredited. The challenge I see is that the financial one is automatic. Those automatically get lost. You by definition are going to go from, you know, if it's $1 million or 3 million, you're going to be non-accredited if you were accredited before. But on the other track, somebody actually has to go do the work. So the investor has to actually say, okay, I really want to do this stuff. I'm going to go take the time to study for this exam. I mean, from my reading, it's not going to be some simple, you're going to have to study for it. Like, this is an exam that's meant to, I mean, the whole purpose of the exam is for you to study and become sophisticated. That's the whole point. The whole point is for you to go from non-sophisticated and know very little or insufficient knowledge about, you know, expertise about this subject, to somebody who knows. I mean, if they're talking about financial reports, right? So you can actually, when you see the pro forma and you see the P&L, you can actually understand what it is, or, you know, or a balance sheet or whatever. Then it's not just going to be something you're going to be able to, you know, just do it over the weekend or something. You're going to have to put some real effort into it. So then the question is, are non-accredited investors going to do that? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's what it's going to trigger. Now, I think if you're actively an LP right now and you're an accredited investor and you make $1 million, $2 million, $2.5 million, and suddenly you get bumped, I can see those people going in and taking the exam, but I don't think it's going to be 100%. So you're still going to lose some people here. I just don't know how many people you're going to add. I'd be interested in doing that survey. Like, how many people are actually going to say, okay, let me go spend a week or a weekend or whatever it's going to take to study for this exam. And then imagine you've got to physically go somewhere to actually go take the exam somewhere. What percentage of your investors are really going to do that? And I don't know the answer to that, but the answer to that will give you the answers if that's going to increase the demand. Because if they don't do that, and the overall result is there's a smaller pool of accredited investors, meaning there's more non-accredited, then I think you've got to start putting in the work and establishing those pre-existing substantive relationships, which is one of the arguments we've been making over the last year, which is like, hey, you may want to start establishing these, relationships even with accredited investors, especially those that are making just barely accredited, because if this law does pass, you at least have the backup that you can go 506B and you've got a pre-existing relationship with these now non-accredited, and so you can continue to get them in the door. But at the end of the day, I think it's just going to be which group of people is going to increase more. I hope that answered the question, Greg. Jared, it'll bring a lot of liquidity, which will bring in more volatility. It's a very fun and interesting time to be a syndicator. This is the convergence of AI, blockchain, crypto will massively change the entire investing experience. Will it bring liquidity? It kind of depends on. I'm gonna stick to. I mean, I'm just obviously developing these thoughts as these things come out, but I've got to. Again, it's all going to come down to how many people are actually going to get out of their butts, study, take personal responsibility, go down the street, take an exam. And if a lot of people do that, then yeah, it's going to increase liquidity. If not, if everybody's going to be like, yeah, it's too complicated, let me just put money in the stock market, then you're not going to see liquidity, I think. Greg, the accredited pool of available capital will contract. The accredited pool of available capital will contract. Is that a statement? Because we're all assuming that this is going to open up more opportunity, and I think it does open the opportunity, but the question is going to be, are they actually going to take that opportunity and do something with it, which I don't know. Greg, you unmuted. You want to say something there?
Yeah, Mauricio, I did. First, thanks for everything that you do on this. This is fantastic info, and it's a real commitment on your part. I know I speak for everybody when I say that we appreciate it. What I meant by that comment was that if it becomes more difficult to become accredited, then those accredited dollars that are in circulation are going to become more scarce because the bar is going to go up and there won't be as much available to invest in funds. So they're either going to get more picky, or those that are raising funds are going to have to turn more to the non-accredited.
Correct, but that assumes that there's going to be less accredited, and the argument is going to be, well, no, now you have every single person out there in the world can go take an exam and become accredited. So you theoretically could have 100% of the population be accredited now because everybody can go take an exam and pass it. That's the argument, right?
But few will probably do it.
That's what I don't know. And that's what, honestly, as we're having, this is why I love having these discussions too, because it gets me thinking as well. The interesting question is, will they do it? Yes, if you're somebody on this call and you're really committed, and yes, but what percentage of the population is do that? How many of your LP investors are going to take? That's going to be an interesting thing to follow. And so maybe I'll throw out a poll out there to see if how many of you guys would, when I say you guys, non-accrediteds that are out there, would be interested in that. So that's an interesting thing that's just actually literally going through my mind right now. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Jeff, that may be another obstacle for investors because investors like streamline, even if it's for their success. Yeah, I mean, that's the reality, right? I mean, we are kind of spoiled. I would argue we're spoiled because we're like-minded people, right? We hang out at the same conferences and we come to these events and we all have a certain mentality. And then you forget that that's not the vast majority of the population. We're kind of a very small, I'm going to say elite group, because of the way we think. But if you then go out to the masses, I don't know. It's going to be a very interested. Everybody's assuming that this is going to open up. It isn't going to open up the opportunity, but are they actually going to take that opportunity? That's an interesting thing. Jared, I know of a huge population. I know. Oh, this is a good point. All right. Jared's always with your crypto stuff, and I appreciate that, my friend. But yeah, I know a huge population of crypto traders that would gladly take a free exam to enter this world. So there is a lot of folks out there that have made quite a bit of money on crypto, not enough to become accredited. They're looking to diversify. I assume that's what you mean, Jared, looking to diversify a little bit into real estate, into other hard assets. And they'd love to be able to get into some of these deals, which they currently cannot. I appreciate Chris. Thanks. Love how these Zooms get straight to the freaking point. I'd rather just ramble for like 5-10 minutes, get to the point, and then open up to Q&A. So, and then once we run out of the Q&A of this particular prop, I'll obviously stick around and answer any questions you have about syndications or anything else. Doug, agree. Depends on how you take the course. All of my real estate courses are online with video instructors. Exams give feedbacks and allow for 3 retries. Yeah, and I don't know how the technology works, to be honest with you. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's the concern, right? The idea is not for people to just pass an exam. The idea is for people to actually learn this stuff. If you go back to the basics of education, the whole point of taking a standardized test is to sort of test you on what you've learned over the, in school. It's obviously a semester, a quarter, or whatever. But we don't want we don't want just people that are just going to pass the exam. We want people to actually learn this stuff. And I guess the odds of somebody. I mean, I don't even know how you prevent that. I mean, Jared, you're maybe there's somebody else here who's just as technically advanced as Jared, but Jared, is there a way for you to do an online, if you don't mind, Jared, is there a way for you?
Yeah, I'm just driving.
Yeah, no worries. Is there a way for you is the technology there that you can take an exam online right now? Yeah, but I mean, I can have the book right here. How do you prevent somebody from taking an open book exam?
So the bigger concern is AI. Is like, if this isn't an in-person exam and that this is online, it's going to be done by AI, or it can be very, very easily right now. So it's going to be biometric scanners that I don't know, however they want to do it. I mean, like, the technology exists absolutely to, like, if you're sitting in front of your computer and you have like a newer computer, let's say like a newer Mac or something, you're going to be able to, if you allow like the video to be on the entire time, to ensure like you can study how that person's taking the exam. You can for sure do. It's a lot of work though. Like, that's a very strict, but so is everything else in this world.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's like a lot of compliance and regulation.
Yeah, and I think I saw, where is it? Is it in the actual, I don't know if it was in the bill or the preamble, but somebody did a study of how much this would cost, and the numbers seemed really small. Like, hey, you need to go hire, you know how the government is, right? This is how much it's going to cost. They were like, hey, they're going to have to hire 2 or 3 extra staff people, and they need to administer the test and blah, blah, blah. And it was going to be like another $1 million or $2 million. It sounds to me that if you're going to do some AI technology with biometric reading and blah, 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 that's probably like a $1 trillion problem for the government.
Yeah, well, Sam Altman's doing it right now. So Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he's doing it right now with a coin on blockchain, I presume, but don't know for sure, called wow, I really hope I get this right, but OneCoin, or One World. I don't know the one exactly, but it's basically a coin. It's a way of biometrically scanning an individual to assess whether or not the content was created by a real person or AI. Because that's the bigger concern here is that we're rapidly moving into a world where we're not going to know the difference between if someone is real or AI. So He's solving that right now actively.
Yeah, well, first of all, I hope it's not OneCoin, because I just Googled it. OneCoin is a fraudulent cryptocurrency scheme conducted by offshore companies. So it's probably something else. Yeah, look, Jared, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I think most people taking the exam aren't going to be sophisticated enough to figure out how to do a plug-in for the AI and this, that, the other. I think it's just almost like the people who try and cheat at poker, online poker. I think the bigger concern is going to be, there's going to be these study guides that are going to come out. You're going to have this big book that you're going to be studying from. And then what prevents you from just having an open book? Now, to your point, maybe the biometrics can read your eyes and see that whether you're looking at the screen or whether you're looking at the side. You know what? I'm based on all of now that I'm thinking about it. I bet you they're just going to it's going to go down the DMV and take a test. I mean, it's going to go down to your local whatever and take it in person. Otherwise, it just gets.
They might. I mean, they can do it. You also have to. You have to ask if, like, do you think they really want to? Like, are they going to go through all that hassle, or are they just going to sign this off because Congress wants it and worry about regulation later?
Yeah, Mustafa brings up a great point, actually, because Mustafa, from personal experience, like, I mean, this is why this is so great. So Mustafa says, I took a financial exam recently here in Canada remotely, and there was a proctor watching me on camera the whole time and asked me to show my screen and surroundings, every whatever, every so while. So I guess you could just have a proctor sitting there and having, all 30 people that instead of being in a physical room, they're on a kind of like the Zoom gallery view or whatever, and they can just be looking at, what do they have around themselves. So I guess maybe we're overcomplicated. Thanks, Mustafa. That, you think of all these complicated things and it's like, well, you just have a proctor. It's a big deal. Drew, yeah, I agree. AI is too advanced for governments. They won't use it, and they'll make you show up. I think they're going to make you show up. Look, when you go take a DMV test, how do you go take it? At least here in California, you got to physically go down to the thing and take it in person. So my vote's if I was putting money on this, then I would say it's going to be a physical thing. Jeremy says it's called the World Coin. Thanks, Jeremy. Not the one coin. Cool. Anyway, so it's a kind of a short thing there. It's just, Bill, we'll keep track of it as soon as the Senate presumably passes it. Then I don't know if it's worth another Zoom or not, but I'll definitely post it on the Real Estate Syndicator community. If you're not a member, I would highly recommend trying to add more and more value in that community as I can. Anybody have any syndication questions at all? Any asset protection questions? If you guys want, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit and answer those. If not, I better call it a day. Just
Mauricio.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Kendall.
It's Kendall. So I got a question. So when you pass the test, do you just have a paper, or is it just going to be something in the database for everybody to see? Like, how are they going to track who passed this test and who did?
It's going to be they call it a certification program. So you're just going to get a certificate, just like, I don't think that's going to be a big issue. So you're going to get certified. And then, you mean in terms of like, how would you take reasonable steps to verify? Yeah, that's a good point. That you're going to probably have I think I did read somewhere on the certification thing that you'd have a database or something. So you'd be able to go on a website, put in somebody's name, and then do that. Obviously, with blockchain, you can definitely have a token that would do that if you're doing that world. But yeah, you're going to have to be able to, take reasonable steps to verify. You're going to have a document that's going to show it, or it's going to be on a database. But these days, you can take reasonable steps to verify. Somebody can send you a piece of paper. They can just send you a 1099, and there's no verification. Like you just you assume it's not fraudulent, right? So you're allowed to rely on, hey, this person sent me a 1099. I don't have to go search them. Well, you can't go search the IRS website or anything. So yeah. Hopefully it'd be nice. It would be, look, the easy answer would be if it was the database, because then I can just literally go on, just like now I can go check if somebody has a Series 65 or a Series 7. Like, it would be nice to be able to go on a website, like a FINRA website, and just enter somebody's name, and then their license number or verification number would show up. But that would be ideal. But if not, they'll just give you a piece of paper, just like if you had to show somebody your tax return or your W-2 or whatever. It's going to be something that would show that you have passed this exam. And then the question we don't know is, how long is this test going to be valid for? Is it something like you have to take, probably not every year, but is it every 5 years? Is it forever? I'm guessing you're going to have to probably do some updates on that examination, because the rules do change. Yeah, Doug brings up a great question here as well. Like, what about investors outside the US? Are you going to force them to fly to the US, just, like to go get their verification thing and have to do a thing on, an exam in person, or is there going to be some sort of a online thing? But that's another great question, because there's no different rules for international. You still have to take reasonable steps to verify. And if you can't get official documents like a W-2 1099, you still have to show reasonable steps. So that's an interesting question, Doug. We shall find out. Jeff says, if we get a list of non-accredited investors through advertising, it would be interesting to see how it is handled after they become accredited. If we get a list of non-accredited investors through through advertising. Well, if you got a list of non-accredited investors through advertising, you would not be able to use those for a 506B. And of course, right now, you would not be able to use it for a 506C. But what you can do, by the way, just maybe I'm going to digress here, Jeff. What you can do is you're going to catch non-accredited investors when you do a general blast, right? So let's say you're doing a 506C and you catch non-accredited. You can then theoretically go through the process of establishing a substantive relationship with the non-accredited. And once you establish that substantive relationship, you could then offer them a future deal if you decide the next deal to be a 506B. So that's something you could do. But I think if if you have a list of people you've got from advertising, and they're in your non-accredited bucket, and then what I would do is I would send them an email and say, hey guys, good news. You guys can now become accredited. I know you weren't eligible the first time you talked to me, but now there's a way for you to become eligible. Go take a test here and report back to me. And then you'll be able to move them from the non-accredited bucket to the accredited bucket. So that's another reason just to have even non-accredited these days, because you have the option to educate them and send them emails. And look, when this thing passes and there's actually certification, you guys should all be blasting your lists and letting them know that there's a way for them to become accredited. And if you've spoken with people who were interested in your deal and they couldn't invest because they were non-accredited, then you can call them up and say, hey, now you can make it. So go take a test. Vincent, tests may be given at test centers where you prove your ID. Yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately where it's going to happen. Although I can't, to Doug's point, I can't imagine that you're going to have to, if you're an international investor, you're going to have to fly out to take the test. So there's going to be some special rules for internationals for sure. Any other questions? Anybody have any questions? Cool. I am going to be at Limitless next week, but I'm going to do it from the hotel. So next Wednesday, 4:30. If anybody's in Limitless, let me know. I'd love to meet up with you guys while I'm there in Scottsdale. It's Ken McElroy and Tall Yarber's event. I was there last year. It was amazing. Great event. It's about 2,000 people, I think. But if you're there, DM me. Let's connect. And if not, I'll see you guys next week at 4:30 from the hotel. Thanks, everyone.